You need to know that the person you believe you are never really existed. Today, you will understand that everything you believe you are is nothing but a lie. A story you've repeated so many times that you ended up believing it. In this video, you're going to discover why Carl Jung said that life only truly begins when you find yourself. But that finding isn't theoretical or cliched, it's visceral. You'll understand why you live in conflict with parts of yourself, why you keep repeating patterns that hurt you, and how to access something that goes far beyond logic and ego, your real essence. If you watch until the end, you'll come away with clarity, you'll understand the roles you were taught to play, you'll see your shadow without fear, and most importantly, you'll feel there's a place inside you where everything makes sense, and you can go back there anytime. This video isn't just more content, it's a portal back home. The question is, are you ready to cross through? How many times have you made decisions just to please others? Worn certain clothes because they were appropriate? Hidden your opinion so you wouldn't seem strange? Or accepted an invitation just to avoid displeasing someone? We shape ourselves so much that we start forgetting where who we are ends, and where who we're expected to be begins. Carl Jung recognized this. He said most people live like characters on a stage, following scripts they didn't even write. Worse yet, many don't realize they're acting. What appears to be choice is often just social survival. But don't worry, this isn't a condemnation, it's an invitation. A call to remove the foggy lenses and see what's really behind the mirror. Because deep down, there's something more genuine, more alive. According to Jungian depth psychology, the unconscious mind is always nudging us toward truth, even when we resist. And sometimes this nudge comes in the form of a crisis, anxiety, or that existential discomfort you feel on a Sunday night. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's like something inside you saying, hey, there's more here that you haven't seen yet. Carl Jung called this search individuation, a journey to stop being who you're expected to be and finally become who you truly are. And it's not just any journey, it's like digging up a chest buried deep in your soul, filled with lost fragments, stifled desires, and parts of you that you never knew existed. Along the way, you'll meet the famous archetypes, stumble on the shadow, according to Jung, and maybe even have an uncomfortable chat with your masks. But believe me, every step is worth it. And it all begins when you realize that the version of yourself you've been defending so fiercely might not really be you at all. You know that Instagram filter you use? The one that conceals dark circles, brightens your smile, and softens reality just a bit? That's basically the persona, just on a deeper level of the mind. Carl Jung described the persona as the social mask we wear to be accepted in the world. It's not exactly fake, but it's not completely real either. It's like the persona you adopt in a job interview, trying to appear more confident than you really are, or the smiley face that shows up on a date, even when your heart is in chaos. What's most curious is that we don't even realize how much we hide behind these layers. On social media, it's easy. Smile, pose, post. But in real life, how many times have you pretended you were fine so nobody would worry? Or said everything's okay, just to avoid explaining the turmoil inside? Carl Jung knew this social adaptation was necessary, of course, but he also warned that when you identify too strongly with the persona, you end up losing yourself. And that, my friend, is where the confusion between who I am and who they expect me to be begins. Now look closely at this question. Do you behave as you truly are or as others expect you to be? It's tough, right? But absolutely essential, because that confusion between persona and essence is where many adult life pains lurk. Career choices that make no sense, relationships in which we don't feel seen, a life that looks lovely on the outside but feels empty on the inside. Understanding the persona doesn't mean getting rid of it. It means learning to use it without being imprisoned by it. Because once you begin noticing the masks you wear, you also start to see what lies behind them. Have you noticed how certain people drive you crazy? Sometimes it's someone's arrogant demeanor, their lack of sensitivity, or that type who always wants more attention than everyone else. But what if I told you that what bothers you most about others might be exactly what you haven't had the courage to see in yourself? Carl Jung called that the shadow. And no, it's not evil or dangerous. The shadow, according to Jung, is everything we reject or hide because we believe it doesn't fit who we're supposed to be. But it stays there, behind the scenes, influencing our reactions, our choices, even our silence. Jealousy, irritation, comparison, judgment. These are just a few of the signs that appear when the shadow decides to show its face. Think of that little bit of envy you pretend not to feel, or that critique disguised as, I'm just being honest. The collective unconscious carries old patterns of repression, and the ego learned to push everything under the rug. But an emotional rug accumulates dust, and sooner or later, it starts to choke you. Jungian psychology shows that ignoring the shadow only makes it stronger. The first step in dealing with it is admitting it's there. No drama, no guilt, just courage. Want a simple but powerful exercise? Think of someone you just can't stand. Oh, instead of pointing fingers, ask, what exactly about this person bothers me? And does that trait exist, even a little bit, in me too? Hard questions, right? But extremely revealing. How does the unconscious mind work? Through reflection. We project onto others what we can't bear to admit in ourselves. And once you start tugging at that thread, get ready, because it may lead to an internal battle that changes everything around you. Everyone has a hero inside. But, unlike in the movies, he doesn't wear a cape or ride in on a white horse. The hero, according to Jung's archetypes, is that part of you that feels called to grow, to overcome your fears, to break old patterns, to exit autopilot. But to make that happen, he has to face an enemy worthy of him, your shadow. It's an internal battle, silent, unfolding when you want to change. But sabotage yourself when you dream big, but immediately think, that's not for me. That's where the real adventure starts. Let me tell you a story. A man spent years stuck, living with his parents, hating his job, always saying, I'm just not lucky in life. And one day, he decided to face a long-held pain, the shame of having been humiliated in childhood. Instead of running from it, he wrote about it in a journal, read about depth psychology, started therapy, and confronted his own shadow. Slowly, he reconnected with the desire to study, took a chance on change, and created his own business. What once seemed impossible began to happen. And that's only because he had the courage to get into conflict with the part of himself keeping him stuck. Carl Jung used to say that true growth comes from grappling with our inner darkness, not from running away from it. And this battle isn't something you win once and for all. It's a process, a dance between light and shadow, an ongoing back and forth between fear and courage. I want a practical example? Try writing down, what in me is begging to be seen, but I pretend I don't see. Don't rush the answer. The unconscious mind is like a locked trunk. The more persistently and honestly you ask, the more it shows you. And the more you discover, the more you realize that your idea of who you are might never have been so solid after all. Some people spend their entire lives clinging to a dangerous phrase, that's just how I am. But is it? Or were your ways shaped by fear, abandonment, or someone's harsh look when you were young? Carl Jung invited us to look beyond the surface and recognize that the ego, our personality's manager, loves to pretend it knows who we are. It creates a sort of character, confident, shy, strong, indecisive, and we wear that character for years, sometimes decades. But what if all of it is just a reflection of what you were taught to be? What if you're playing a role you haven't even realized you chose? The truth, as uncomfortable as it may seem, is that you're not fixed. You're not a label. You're not a trauma. You're not a narrative you repeat in the mirror every day. You are movement, possibility. You are, as Jung said, a living field of consciousness, changing with every experience. Yet, when the ego clings to an old story, even a painful one, it's trying to control the chaos of change. That's why when you lose a job, leave a relationship, or watch your life turn upside down, a crisis hits like an earthquake. Not because you're losing yourself, but because you might finally be starting to find yourself. And that's where the conflict arises. The rational mind wants logical answers, but the collective unconscious whispers symbols, dreams, intuitions. That's when the ultra-practical person breaks down watching a movie, or the ultra-strong person finally feels vulnerable. It's not weakness, it's the self calling you home. It's accepting that the certainty about who you are might be the prettiest prison you could ever build. And the beginning of freedom? It's when you start to ask sincerely, what if I'm not any of what I thought I was? And that's still okay. The truth is, most people live surrounded by noise, externally and internally. Voices telling you what to do, who to be, how to act. Carl Jung taught us that finding your true self requires something rare these days, silence. But not just any silence. That silence that's uncomfortable, that reveals, that tears open all you've kept buried for years. The problem is, we're used to running from it, distracting ourselves with our phones, our next goal, the feed that never ends. Meanwhile, our soul becomes stifled. Your inner truth doesn't shout, it whispers. But how can you hear it if you never get quiet? Jung teaches that the self, the larger consciousness that lives in each of us, needs room to show up. And that room isn't found on a calendar. It's space within your soul. When was the last time you were alone with yourself, with nothing to do, no music, no notifications, just you and your thoughts? It sounds simple, but it's one of the most challenging, transformative exercises out there. In that empty space, the collective unconscious can start sending images, sensations, forgotten memories. And there, in the discomfort of the pause, is where your true self begins to stir, slowly, like someone coming back home after years away. Looking for something practical? Create a ritual for yourself. 10 minutes a day of journaling. Write whatever comes to mind, no censoring. Take walks in silence without your phone, simply observing the world around you. Sit on your porch and focus on your breathing. It sounds like a little, but it can turn your life upside down in the best possible way. Because when you begin to hear that inner voice, you realize many of your so-called goals or dreams were borrowed ideas. Carl Jung said that the path to individuation involves profound listening to the soul. And as you start listening, you also begin to realize that the entire world carries wounds much like your own. If each of us has a shadow inside, imagine the size of the shadow society carries as a whole. Jung called it the collective shadow, the dark side of humanity nobody wants to see, yet which keeps showing up. It's in the prejudices passed down for generations, the quick judgments, the mass cancellations, the absolute truths forced by trends. Society learns to hide its wounds the same way an individual does, by denying, repressing, projecting. And so we keep feeding conflicts nobody wants to admit exist within themselves. All you have to do is look around. Racism, intolerance, toxic beauty standards, ruthless competition. These are symptoms of what's been swept under the collective unconscious rug. We point fingers but rarely ask ourselves, where does this discomfort come from? Often, the answer lies in the shadow we share. When you feel hatred for a group, disgust for an idea, or contempt for a lifestyle, maybe it's not just your opinion. Maybe it's the echo of a part of you that, from an early age, was condemned to exile. The shadow, according to Jung, isn't just yours, it's ours. And change? It begins with the small stuff, recognizing your own judgments before pointing out someone else's, questioning why you keep repeating phrases that aren't even yours, noticing that what you reject in the world might be begging for healing inside you. Jung shows us that real social transformation starts with individual self-awareness, because when you can look upon your own shadows with compassion, you begin to see other people's shadows with humanity as well. And that changes everything, including how you understand balance between what's masculine, feminine, logical, and intuitive. Inside each of us is a silent dance between two forces, the masculine and the feminine. It has nothing to do with gender, it's about energy. Carl Jung called these forces the anima and the animus. The anima is our sensitive, intuitive, receptive dimension. The animus is the rational, firm, action-oriented side. When these energies are in harmony, life flows with more clarity. But when there's imbalance, we freeze up, harden, or get lost in confused emotions. And it's more common than you'd think. Just look at how many men were raised to swallow their tears, and how many women were forced to apologize for having strength. Psychology shows that denying these energies inside is like trying to live with half your soul asleep. A man who represses his intuition becomes trapped by rigidity. A woman who silences her authority ends up crumbling inside. It's not about swapping roles, it's about integrating, striking balance, letting the part of you that was denied find space to exist with dignity. Want a powerful exercise? Pay attention to your reactions this week. When you feel anger, sadness, impulsiveness, or complete paralysis, ask, which part of me is trying to speak right now? It might be the anima asking for room to feel, or the animus reminding you to take action. The key isn't to choose one or the other, it's learning to listen to both. More than that, it's accepting that within you are multiple versions wanting to be acknowledged. Because knowing yourself, as Jung taught, isn't about picking a side. It's about integrating what you've denied, and allowing all sides to coexist with awareness. How many times have you defined yourself by what you do? I'm a teacher. I'm a mother. I'm a business owner. But what if all that is just clothing you wear? Carl Jung warned that the ego loves collecting labels to feel secure. But the self, that deeper, vaster essence, doesn't fit into titles, achievements, or even stories of pain. The self isn't your past. It isn't your resume, not even your successes. The self is the sky, and your experiences are merely passing clouds. Some are dense, others light, but none of them represent you in your entirety, because you're so much more than words can describe. Jung taught that the idea of a fixed self is just a comforting illusion. The ego builds walls to try to understand the world, but the self knocks them down, as if saying, you weren't born to fit in, you were born to expand. That's why so many people fall apart after finally achieving what they always wanted, only to feel empty. Because the ego wants results, but the self wants connection, meaning purpose. It wants to see you truly alive, not just functioning. And for that to happen, you need to stop defining yourself by a phase, a failure, or an old version of you. Think about it. You're not only what you've suffered, nor only what you've overcome. You're not just what was shown to you, nor just what you learned to hide. You're a living field of consciousness in constant flux. And the more you align with the self, the more you realize you didn't come here to play a role, but to live a journey. A journey of expansion, of discovery, of returning home to yourself. And that journey, which Jung called individuation, doesn't have a set endpoint. Because it isn't about arriving, it's about remembering every day to come home. If you've come this far, something inside you has already started to wake up. And that's no small thing. Carl Jung said that true life doesn't begin at birth. It begins the moment you decide to look within. Now that you've caught a glimpse of the stage where the ego performs, the personas backstage, the reflections of the shadow, and the call of the self, tell me, are you willing to start your own individuation journey? You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know every step. You just need to take the first one. And that step is observing. For 7 days, make a silent pact with yourself. Watch the roles you play day to day. At work, are you who they expect you to be? In your relationships, do you speak with the voice of your soul or the voice of the fear of being rejected? Before going to bed, ask, was I myself today or just my idea of me? These small questions are like lanterns, lighting your path in the dark. They won't give you all the answers, but they'll show you where you are. And only those who know where they are can decide where they're going. Life doesn't begin when you're born. It begins when you find yourself. And that encounter doesn't happen all at once, on one specific day, in one magical moment. It happens gradually, in silences and discomfort and the questions you stop avoiding. Carl Jung never promised this would be easy, but he promised something infinitely more valuable, the chance to live a life of meaning. So, are you ready to discover who you really are? Now tell me, after all you've heard, will you keep living on autopilot? Or will you have the courage to look in the mirror sincerely and ask, who am I really, beneath everything I was taught to be? You don't have to have all the answers right now, but you need to start asking the right questions. Because when you begin observing yourself consciously, old patterns start to crumble, pain starts to speak, and the soul starts to breathe. And if this content moved you, don't ignore the call. If at any point you felt as though I was talking directly to your soul, maybe in fact I was, because once we start touching the shadow, the persona, the self, there's no going back to autopilot. So tell me, which part of this video made you reflect the most? Comment below, I read everything. And your answer might be the very mirror someone else needs. Subscribe to the channel now, because this is just the beginning. Come with us to dive deeper into Carl Jung's teachings, the mysteries of the collective unconscious, the archetypes that shape us. Turn on notifications so you won't miss anything, because the next episodes will shake up everything you thought was certain. And between us, is there anything better than finally starting to find yourself? And remember this, you are not alone on this journey. This is a safe space for questioning, feeling, and growing. So share this video with anyone else who's searching for something beyond the surface, because when one soul awakens, it lights up the others around it.